Hey gang, it's your buddy Platt. Today I show you how to make malt syrup. So let's go. Alright guys, got a fun little video for you today. For those of you that are new to the channel, you're just coming here to find out info about malt syrup. My name is Platt. I am the founder of the Platt Art channel. I am a home brewer, winemaker, cider maker. I make all kinds of alcoholic beverages at home. And in home brewing, we deal with sugar. Sugar is what yeast converts into alcohol. So we do a lot of work with sugar, and today I thought I'd expand on that work. We're not going to make a beer, we're going to make malt syrup. What is malt syrup? Think of malt syrup as similar as corn syrup, treacle, molasses. We're extracting sugar out of a sugar source and then concentrating it into a syrup form. In home brewing, they take it up to another level and make what's called malt extract. Either it's really hard or it's a powdered form. That's a little outside of what you can do at home. You generally need some kind of a vacuum setup. You know, it's done under vacuum pressure or whatever. But we're going to make malt syrup today. Malt syrup you can utilize in all kinds of cooking, sweetening. You can add it to sweet tea or whatever. Just really useful. Again, you kind of interchange it with things like honey, agave, what have you, to sweeten a different flavor profile, but that's it. Real quick, let's talk about some of the basics in the term malt. For this purpose, when we say malt, the root word is maltose. Maltose is a type of sugar like fructose, sucrose. Maltose comes from grains, malted grain. Now, what does it mean to malt grain? In grain, you have a seed, and inside it's just starch. There's no actual sugar inside. But when that seed starts to germinate, it kicks off enzymes that starts to turn that starch into sugar to help that plant start growing. What we want to do in the malting process is you start germinating that seed, you kick off the enzymes, then you shut down the germination process, and then you just have enough of those enzymes out that when you start to brew your beer, you kick off that process of the enzyme converting it to sugar, which again we need to produce beer. So that's what goes on in the malting process. In beer making, we utilize malted barley. They've done the malting for us. We don't have to do that. And that's a perfect segue into researching this topic. I noticed a lot of videos that make malt syrup. They do it a little different. I think I only found one video that actually uses malted barley, and they go through a little more. They actually malt the grains, sprout them and everything. Again, we don't have to do that because someone's already done that for us. But most of the videos I've seen is they take rice, which rice, even though it's a grain, does not have its own diastatic power. That is the enzyme power to convert its own starches into sugar. If you've ever made sake, they utilize something called koji, a mold spore, that does that form, but rice can't do it by itself. So in these videos I've seen for malt syrup, people have sprouted wheat and done the malting of wheat and then pitched it in to the rice because wheat has its own diastatic power. It can convert its own starches into sugar, and it has enough of that diastatic power that it could share with another source, i.e. rice. If you want to go that route because you live in a place or rice is your predominant starch source, let me make a suggestion. Instead of wheat, utilize barley. Barley has, of all the grains, the most diastatic power. It can do a lot of that conversion for you. A perfect example is in the bourbon world. They will corn does not naturally, you can malt corn, but a lot of times in the production of bourbon, they don't use malted corn. They just crush the corn because barley, they'll throw in a little barley into the bourbon mash, and barley has enough diastatic powers that it does it for them. So it saves them from malting the corn. And so I would suggest going with barley. Now for this purpose, we are not going to use rice because rice, in that example, is just a starch source. Well, barley is also a starch source. So we're just going to do it all with barley. We're going to make a true malted barley syrup. Let's get into real quick what we need to make this. First, we're going to need a gallon of water. And then I have one of these mesh bags. In home brewing, it's called Brewing the Bag. They're painter bags, whatever you want to call them. This is going to save you a lot of time and effort. If you watch other videos on making malt syrup, you see all this straining, they do it whatever. This is a vastly more efficient way. And then over here, I have 2 pounds of crushed barley. Now, me being a home brewer, I have my own little hand crank mill because I don't brew big batches, but I can crush my own grains. It has a little hopper up top, just pour it in, I crush it. Now, we don't totally pulverize it, we don't turn it into powder. Well, that's one of the things I've noticed in other videos is they throw it through like a blender or a coffee grinder. That might be a little too fine. It will still work, but you really reduce your efficiency in sugar extraction. Also, too, you're more likely to end up with dough balls if you turn it into a fine powder. This just crushes it. So I have 2 pounds of that, 1 gallon of water, and then you are going to need a glass container to store your stuff in because you're pouring this in hot, so no plastic or any other. You're going to need a glass jar to put it in. So with that being said, let's get to making some malt syrup. All right, guys, so we've heated up 1 gallon of water to around 160 degrees. We are going to pitch in our 2 pounds of grain. If you're a home brewer, this is what we refer to as the mash in. Basically, we're adding our grains into our water. You want to give this a good stir. You want to make sure we don't have any dough balls, any pieces of dried grain. So give this a good stir. Make sure we get all those grains wet. Now what we're going to do is cover this, and we're going to let this sit for an hour. We heat it up to 160. Once we add the grains, it'll cool it down to about the low 150s. And at that temperature level, the heated water will start to kick in the enzymes that are in the grains, and they will in turn start to turn those starches into sugar. We're going to just leave it like that. We're going to let this sit for an hour, and then we'll come back to strain off those grains. All right, gang, it has been 1 hour that we've let our grains set. In that hour, the hot water has kicked off those enzymes to start converting the starches into sugar. So what we have here is basically a sugary, malty soup. And we're just going to strain our grains off. This is one of the great conveniences of doing this. If you're a home brewer, again, the brewer in the bag method just makes your life a lot easier. If we wanted to, we could start to boil that liquid, add some hops, and that's how we would produce beer. But we're wanting to really get in those sugars, so we're going to do a kind of hard boil to get that water out. So I'm going to let the grains drain for a little bit because we want all that sugary goodness to get out of the grains, and we'll come back to start boiling down our syrup. All right, guys, real quick, we just got done separating the grains, and I want to kind of let you see what this looks like before we start the boil. Still somewhat light in color. Looks, kind of like a dirty honey or maybe a real light maple syrup or whatever. But as you'll see, once we start boiling this down and kind of taking out the water, they'll start to darken a little bit. We don't want this molasses dark, but you will see it start to darken up. So we'll come back when the boil starts. All right, gang, we've just brought our liquid to a boil. And one thing you notice, we're getting a little bit of like a foamy head. Just like when you pour beer, you get a foamy head. In home brewing, this is called the hot break, and you want to be careful and you want to make sure there's plenty of headspace, or as you can see it's rising, you could get a boil over. Now the simplest thing to do with that is just to kind of give it a quick stir. This kind of knocks off the foam, and this only really happens at the start of the boil, but you want to keep your eye on that because if not, it's an absolute mess. Just give this a quick stir. And voila. Now this is very specific to using just malted barley. If you did this with rice, you're not going to have quite the issue. But once that's done, we're just going to keep boiling and reducing. I just want you guys to kind of see the start of the boil. So we'll come back in a little bit when it reduces down even more. All right, guys, while we're waiting to reduce down, I want to bring up a couple quick points. If, however you filtered out the grains, whether you used a bag like I did, cheesecloth, whatever, you probably realized, your hands probably got sticky dealing with that. And that's the thing a lot of people don't know. There is a lot of sugar in malted barley and in the beer making process. You don't think about it in beer because the yeast eats all that sugar to make alcohol, but it's a lot stickier and sweeter substance than you make, so you want to be careful. I just want to give you that heads up. Also, in reviewing, in researching for this video, and a lot of not just malt syrup making, but if you were to make maple syrup or treacle, your own molasses, what have you, they always advise you to have some heated water kind of set off to the side. If this thickens up too much, we can, thin it out a little bit, but you want to make sure you have hot water. You don't want to just dump cold water in there, especially when those, especially when we've got it too thick. The temperature's going to, once we boil off that water, the temperature's going to rise pretty quick, so you don't want to put cold water in. You want to have warm water going, so I'm going to have some water just sit offside here to keep at least a simmer, if not a boil, just in case I need to cut that. So I just want to give those facts real quick, and we'll keep letting our, barley syrup keep working. All right, guys, we're about 30 minutes in the boil, and you've seen we've reduced our volume a good bit. Just want to kind of show you a little bit of a progress. We still got quite a ways to go to get it down to its final reduction. All right, I went to a smaller container because that big, it was a 3-gallon stock pot, was just a little too much. So I put it in a little smaller container so it made it easier to work with. Also, I can get a little more accurate reading on my thermometer there. We're still working it down, still fairly liquid. We're probably a couple hours into this process, and we'll come back when it gets nice and thick. All right, guys, we've done quite a bit of reduction here. You're starting to see we're starting to get a little darker color. I got a little spoonful here, and it's starting to thicken up a little bit. I'm starting to get a little texture. And that is sweet. It's a different kind of sweetness, but we're really starting to get there now. We will come back when we get her about ready. All right, guys, it's really starting to finally thicken up. When you let this cool, it'll thicken even more. Right now, we're kind of at the consistency of like thin pancake syrup, but if I kind of just take a little teaspoon and let this sit, it'll thicken up more. So we're probably 10-15 minutes away from almost being done. We will come back then and jar up our malt syrup. All right, gang, now it's time to go ahead and pour our honey in our jar. Make sure this is glass. We've got hot liquid. Plastics won't do. I know syrup comes in plastic containers, but this won't work for us. We will just, and I always advise, also do it in a sink. God forbid something happened. We don't want this mess on our cabinet, so let's start pouring it in. Now, like I said, it looks thinner now, but it'll thicken up when it cools off. It even looks thick. And a little trick you can do is take a spoon and just kind of hold it, and you see how long it takes for that to kind of drip off the spoon. You can kind of tell the thickness by it, and it's nice and thick. Oh yeah, look how it kind of sticks and scrapes on the container. This almost reminds me of my home brewing kits that have the liquid malt extract. So all right, we're going to let this cool, and we'll come back to wrap up. All right, gang, time to wrap up. Real quick, let's review what we've done. We took 2 pounds of crushed malted barley. We added it to 1 gallon of water that we heated to 160 degrees. Once you add it in the grains, it drops the water temperature down to around the low 150s. We let the grain sit in there for roughly 1 hour and hold at that temperature. At that temperature, what happens is enzymes in the barley kind of get started, and they start converting starch into sugar. After that hour, we strain off the grains, and we take that sugary water solution, and then we boil it down. We end up coming out with 1 pint of our malt syrup. Hindsight being 2020, it took a little longer than I thought. There were 2 things I might would have changed about it. Either A, I do, instead of 1 gallon of water, I did 3 quarts of water. That would have shortened the time to boil. Or probably what I should have done is put 3 pounds of malted barley into 1 gallon of water. would have helped our yield a little bit, and also that grain would have absorbed some of that water. Again, a faster boil. But we end up with a pint of our malt syrup. Again, malt syrup works great in baked goods, anything you kind of need to sweeten up. Um, I'm going to personally use it for my home brewing. In home brewing, when you carbonate beer in a bottle, if you bottle your home brew, you add a little sugar in to kick off the yeast that's still in the beer to help carbonate the beer. Well, a lot of home brewers will use table sugar to do that. Well, why not use malt sugar to do that since I'm already using malted barley? So that's what I'm going to utilize it for myself. Uh, Now let's go ahead and give her a taste test. Let's go ahead and jump in. All right, boy, it's thickening up pretty nice. It's still a little warm, but thickening up nice. Let's go ahead and give it a try. All right, it's nice and sweet. It's a different kind of sweetness. It's not table sugar or corn syrup sweetness. And you know, see, we got pretty nice dark color to it. It has those little darker notes. Reminds me a little bit of darker beer if you drink darker beers. But really nice, good level of sweetness. We made it. We made malt syrup. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or ideas for videos, please put them in the comment section, or you can always find me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.